It's time for the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com, where we are breaking down District 1 and 2 activities week in, week out in the state of Idaho. Brandon Baney, as always, joined by Ryan Scaggs. Is that going to be your thing now? Every time I bring you on, you're going to take a drink from whatever?
Take a swig of coffee.
Yeah.
Or water. Yeah, I think last week it was water.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
got my coffee
that
mug.
should be my calling card. As I come in, I'll just take a drink of something.
Yeah, I've got my Green Bay Packers coffee mug as well. So when they inevitably trade Aaron Rodgers, that's going to be a great time. So anyways, we'll get right into it here. Yep. There was a lot of impactful basketball action that took place over the last couple of days across pretty much every classification as well, because we're getting down to it. Girls district tournaments will start in some places like this weekend or even tomorrow. I think one of the district tournaments starts. So I've been working on brackets like a madman. We're gonna have those up on the website again. All of the district basketball tournament brackets. You can follow along with every conference and every classification at IdahoSports.com. And then for boys basketball, we're ramping up into conference play. The heart of conference play finally for a lot of these teams. So I thought it would be easy to just kind of go in chronological order to talk about some of what has happened, and then we can give away your North Idaho 9 at the end of the show. Does that sound okay, Ryan?
Sounds great.
Okay, so I want to go back to last Friday, January 20th. Couple of big stories there. I think the biggest one though was Lakeland and Sandpoint meeting in boys basketball. This was a contest. What did the headline in the Bonner County Daily Bee say, Ryan? The Sandpoint,
it was like Lakeland versus Sandpoint and a whole lot of free throws. I believe they both took place in the battle for the paddle was the girls' game, a wrestling match, and then the rotary hoop shoot.
Yeah. So it was a big night of competition. In the boys' game, we've been talking about all year, Sandpoint is the team we kind of like. The Bulldogs, they've competed well, considering their schedule, right? When you look at Sandpoint, they're 7-8 overall, but they've played a lot of really challenging teams, Coeur d'Alene, Lewiston, the Spokane schools. They went to that tournament in Hawaii. They beat Lakeland the first time they played this year, 57-51. But in this rematch, it's Lakeland going on the road and getting the win 70-62. Scotty Hawking scored 33 points in the win for the Hawks.
Yeah, that was a big night for the Lakeland senior. And, Lakeland attempted 37 free throws in that game. They had more makes than total attempts from the line from Sandpoint. So Lakeland was able to make the difference, obviously, happened at the line. I mean, really, if you want to look at the nuts and bolts of the game, the difference maker was at the charity stripe in that ball game. And Lakeland getting a big win in the 4A play, I mean, that helps for seeding and it creates kind of a log jam out of the three teams, obviously, with them in Moscow and Sandpoint in the mix. So it'll be interesting to see how things shake up down the stretch. I know Lakeland, I think they have one more game remaining against Moscow, and then they're going to end the season with 5A play. I think their last game of the year might be against Post Falls, if I'm not mistaken, or it's Post Falls or Coeur d'Alene. But yeah, I mean, the Hawks did what they needed to do against Sandpoint, split that season series. So, I mean, if they can pick up a big win against Moscow and hope Moscow gets a win against Sandpoint, they could end up owning the tiebreak there for the possible number one seeded districts.
Yeah, so the way the standings are right now, Sandpoint is 2-2, Moscow is 1-2, Lakeland is 1-2. Sandpoint basically has played Lakeland twice, Moscow, and then they also had their conference game with Coeur d'Alene earlier this year, a game that they lost. And then it's going to come down to, can Moscow knock somebody off? Or can one of these 4A schools get a win, more than likely against Post Falls, right? Yep. Because all the 4A teams, they still are doing this convoluted combined 5A, 4A Inland Empire League where, oh yes, one conference game each against the 5A schools. So
Doesn't only the home game counts, right?
yes. And then for
Okay.
girls, it's the opposite. When the 4A's host, it's the conference game. So it's really fun to keep track of it. To me, that's what it's going to come down to. Otherwise, you're looking at a tie probably at the top with Lakeland and Sandpoint. And then how does that tiebreaker get figured out? We're going to have to ask, but it's important because
I think it's rock, paper, scissors. Just kidding.
I don't know. I don't know if it's differential. I don't know what it is because
Didn't we run into this issue with girls last year or the year before last though? And it was like it was the point differential.
I mean, that's why I kind of went to it. That's usually kind of the default.
Yeah.
But it getting that number 1 seed is so important because you get the bye automatically into the best of 3 series. The way the Inland Empire League postseason works is number 2 hosts number 3 in a win or go home game, and then the winner of that plays the number 1 team in a best of 3 game series. So if Sandpoint and Lakeland both tie for first, whoever gets that, wins the tiebreaker will have a huge advantage.
Yeah, you get that. Because, I mean, Moscow, I mean, let's just be honest, like they're a thorn in people's side sometimes. And, you look at what that team can do, any given night. They've played heartbreaker for some, quite a few years. They have the Bears, and I mean, they've had their heart broken a couple times too. But, the level playing field within the 4A this year, I think, is more evident than ever. Just in the respective rosters. I liked Sandpoint, and I picked them to win the 4A. At the beginning of the season. I still stand on that. I think that if it gets into a 3-game series and the Bulldogs find themselves there, I think that they can be victorious in that stretch. But Lakeland certainly made things interesting Friday night in a raucous atmosphere. They showed up big and got a victory. So, that battle for the paddle gets pretty wild and crazy. And we'll talk about the girls' game because it was even crazier. But yeah, that was a good win for Lakeland on Friday night.
And I guess I shouldn't completely dismiss Moscow. I mean, Moscow beat Lakeland by 20 back in December. I feel like Lakeland has gotten better as the season has gone on. But so Moscow's right there too, right? Any one of those 3 teams.
Seriously.
It's going to come down to the remaining head-to-head matchups between those 3 teams, and then can somebody steal a win against the 5A? And I just don't think anyone's beaten Coeur d'Alene, Lake City, or Lewiston. It's probably going to be Post Falls. Can somebody knock off Post Falls and get that league win against the Trojans? I think that might decide it. So,
and Post Falls is a team, we had Friday night on North Idaho game against Coeur d'Alene. That's a team that is on the upward trend. I mean, I look at that program and how scrappy they play. Coach McLean does a great job with that team. I mean, for as young as they are and as many guards as they have, they maximize what they have with what they're given. And, they're going to be a team to watch in years to come. I just think because they give such great effort on the floor. It's evident. You watch their games. They're not, they may lose by 20, but it's not, for lack of effort. It's just because the other team's got a guy that's 6'6" down in the post that just makes him pay. But yeah, Coach McLean with that Post Falls team, they can make things interesting in that 4A race for sure. Because I think that they could sneak out a couple of wins.
Yeah, and Post Falls they don't have any size, right? Cooper Craig and Asher Bowie are battling inside every night, and they're giving up 3, 4, 5 inches underneath. But man, they fight hard and compete for sure. Okay, so we had the boys basketball game. Lakeland got the win over Sandpoint, and then we had the girls basketball game where, holy smokes, it came down to the very end. Essentially, no time left on the clock, all zeros. A foul is called. Aaliyah Strock to the line to shoot for Sandpoint. The game is tied 43-all. She misses the first. It comes down to the second free throw, and she nails it. And Sandpoint wins in a walk-off 44-43.
How often do you see a walk-off free throw like in basketball? Like you just don't see. You usually see the referees swallow the whistle under 10 seconds. And how egregious was the foul to get her to the line? I don't know. Like I didn't see that call. I just saw the free throw and the clutch, like being able to at least go 50-50 with everything on the line, nobody in the box. You're just shooting. It's basically like you have to imagine you're shooting at 6 o'clock in the morning in the gym and nobody's there, and try to take the pressure off you. But like I said, the crowd was crazy at that game, and for her to nail that free throw at the end to get the victory, hats off, because that's a high pressure packed situation, and that's a big win for Sandpoint.
Yeah, I saw that this year, Ryan. The very first basketball game I did this year was Shelly and Skyline girls basketball in December or in early January, and Skyline was down 3. Shay Shippen put up a 3 as time expired, and she's a great player. And it was like, it looked like it was blocked, it was like well short, and then like all of a sudden it's like, oh, foul called with no time left. So they're down 3. She steps up, makes the first 2 free throws. Shelly then calls a timeout to try and, ice the kicker, ice the shooter. Didn't matter. She made it. It went to overtime. Shelly still won in overtime though. So, but I haven't seen where it wins a game on the walk-off free throw personally. I've seen walk-off free throws to send it to overtime, but this was a wild game. And I guess for Lakeland, even though they lost, this has to be encouraging for them, right? Because Sandpoint has kind of had control of this league for the past couple of years. And so for Sandpoint or for Lakeland to come and perform that well, I think it's pretty encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, that's hats off to Coach Derek. I think he's done a great job with that lineup, with what he's been dealt in his first season, and he's been able to respond fairly well with that team. And I know the girls play extremely hard for him. And, to see what comes of the district tournament, I mean, you could roll in there and say, hey, we've gone toe to toe with them. Anything can happen. Any given night, anything can happen. We just got to show up and, take care of the next play, take care of the ball. If they ball control, they're a really tough team to play against. I mean, they match up very well against, the other 2 teams within the conference and even some of the 5A teams. And, they make things interesting. And, like I said, Coach Derek has them playing very hard. So I'll give hats off to the Hawks. Like they've been, kind of, I think, exceeding expectations a little bit. And that's not to say that they're not a good team, but I think that they're playing pretty darn well. Just their schedule's been pretty difficult for the most part this season, plus especially drawing those 5A schools. You got 3 5A teams within, a stone's throw of your high school that you have to schedule 2 games against. It doesn't help your record.
Yeah. And so for Lakeland, the first time they played Sandpoint this year, they lost by 19, 59-40. And so on the rematch to only lose by 1, Sandpoint has locked up the regular season title because unlike the boys where they wait till the very end to do the arranged marriage of 5A, 4A conference games, they wait till the very end to backload the schedule. The girls were like, let's just get it out of the way early.
They pull they peel the Band-Aid off right at the beginning.
So all of those arranged marriage games have already happened. And so Sandpoint's 4-3 in the league. Lakeland's 1-6. Moscow is 0-6. And so Sandpoint's got the number 1 seed locked up. But yeah, will be interesting if Lakeland can get there to play Sandpoint in that best of 3 for sure. We wanted to give some love to the 4A schools because we haven't talked about them much this year because, well, in a 3-team league, now we're getting to the point where everybody's finally playing each other and we actually have some things that we can talk about there. Also from last Friday, the St. Mary's boys were on the road in Orofino. This was actually on Thursday, the 19th, but St. Mary's,
after we'd done the Prepcast last week.
Yeah. So St. Mary's was at Orofino. This was an important conference game. We had talked about it on last week's Prepcast on the boys side where they had both just lost to Kellogg. Kellogg now still in first place. But this was going to be an important battle because the winner of this would be in the driver's seat for second place. Orofino got off to that undefeated start. They've slid back a little bit recently. St. Mary's always schedules, difficult. They haven't had a ton of games. They've only played 10 games so far where everybody else is approaching 14 or 15. And so this was an important game. It was in Orofino. Grayson Sands, who's the driver of the offense and the defense, really great lead guard for St. Mary's, goes down with a knee injury in the first half of action. He has not returned since that injury, but St. Mary's has steadied the course and weathered the storm. They trailed at Orofino after losing Sands at halftime, 32-30. They rally in the second half. They win 62-51. And so for St. Mary's, this is why they can withstand the loss of a player like Grayson Sands, is because Coach Brian Chase has a system where he's going to play 9 or 10 guys a night. Everybody contributes to, it's like the legs of a centipede. They're all marching in the same direction. It's not dependent upon one player. It's a system. And so for St. Mary's, they're adapting, and playing 9 to 10 guys a night, I think, helps in situations like this.
Yeah, you lose your lead player, kind of the straw that stirs the drink, essentially. You know, and hopefully that Grayson's okay and he's able to return later in the year. I don't know the aspect or the level of that injury that took place, but we wish him the best, obviously. This is just a good kid. Like, I mean, you don't want to see any kid get hurt, but yeah, Coach Chase with that system, I mean, he's just got him so consistent that night in and night out, when you're able to access your bench and everybody gets time, you get put in a pressure-packed situation, you've gotten the minutes. Like, you've been playing consistently, and it's just kind of business as usual. It's just one less guy in the rotation coming through. So, I think down the stretch, they've got a difficult part of the schedule coming up. I mean, they're going to play Kellogg again. They've got Bonners Ferry coming up. They've got Timberlake on that part of the schedule. So, there's going to be some tough games up ahead coming. But, if you can win, 75% of those games going into the district tournament, I think that's going to bode well for you. I think that they could win all of those games if they play well. They could certainly end on a winning streak. But it'll be interesting to see how things shake out for that Lumberjack team. But Coach Chase, I mean, you talk about minds in the basketball game in our area. He's one of the best. So I don't see that team falters too much without Grayson being in the lineup.
So we talked about the light schedule for St. Mary's so far, only 10 games. They're 7-3. Over the next 20 days, Ryan, or really starting on the 28th. That's their next game is on the 28th of January. In a 20-day span, they will play 9 games.
That's packed. That's a lot of activity.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot. So they're going to be, depending on how this thing goes, they wrap up the season with Orofino, Kendrick, Kellogg, Timberlake. That could really put them into some positive momentum and on an upward trajectory.
Absolutely.
Going into districts. And again, districts is going to be so important to win districts because second place will have to get to state via a play-in game. And so,
yeah,
we'll see.
And they're battle tested. I mean, that team's made it to state and made runs the last few years. So, I mean, like that, their experience, there's kids on that lineup that are, they remember being on the court for a state championship. So, they're not too far away from having some of those guys that are there that contributed. And, I think there's still the hunger there, and there's maybe a little bit of motivation as well with having Grayson out. We'll see when he comes back or if he comes back, but I'm still not counting them out by any means. That's just a good group of kids, and they play really extremely hard.
Yes. Let's move to 3A basketball, where Bonners Ferry, man, they just keep on rolling. They're 13-1. The same night that St. Mary's rallied to beat Orofino, Bonners Ferry was playing Lakeside. And we know, even though that's a 3A versus a 1A D1, we know what kind of team Lakeside is. Bonners Ferry gets the win by 10, 87-77. Then they go beat the crap out of Lincoln County, Montana, the Lincoln Lions up in Eureka. And then I could say that because I'm from Montana. And then they
better you than me, but yeah.
Can I tell a quick story? We always get sidetracked here. Lincoln County High School. It's in Eureka, Montana. That's like 20 miles from the Canadian border up north in Montana. When I was in high school, they would be like what is a 3A school in Idaho, and my high school was what would be like a 4A school in Idaho. Okay. Well, their enrollment for whatever reason peaked, and so they got bumped up to our classification level, and we had to play them in their very first game ever as basically a 4A football member. And so in the previous years, we had run the wing tee offense, and we just ran the ball. Well, my senior year, we had a new quarterback, and he had a rifle for an arm, and so we kind of modified it to a spread offense. So kind of like we did a 180. And so this Lincoln County High School, they asked all the other teams, at the classification level, like, hey, what does Stevensville High do? And they're like, oh, just be prepared for a heavy dose of the run. They run the wing tee. So then we show up in this spread, and we just obliterate these guys. They were so mad at us. They're like, I don't know how you do things up here at Class A level, but in Class B, we have a little more respect for our opponents. And anyways, they were all salty about it. And They made us change. We couldn't even use their locker room. They made us change in the school cafeteria.
What?
Yeah. So,
Oh, weird.
anyways, that's
Things
my
are different in Montana. But
yeah. So that's my diatribe
we have a
about.
little bit more pride, as Napoleon Dynamite, the principal says, in the great gem state. We have a little bit more pride than that.
Yeah. So anyways, Lincoln County, Montana, Bonners Ferry kicks the crap out of them. Then they come back, and last night they host Kellogg, and this is a big. They used to be conference rivals. Kellogg now
Yep.
at the 2A level. Kellogg has been on fire. Bonners Ferry wins again in a tight one by 10, 63-53. This is a Bonners Ferry team, I think, that can go to state and actually make waves. The other
Absolutely.
3A schools around the state, I don't think really know what Bonners Ferry is capable of. I think the Badgers could really
it's a
go down
giant
there.
lurking. I think it really is
Yeah.
a giant kind of lurking under the surface. I think we're seeing it up here in North Idaho with what they're able to do against light competition and what they've done, to some really good teams. And I think people look at the schedule and they're like, oh, they're just playing 1A D1 teams and they're playing a bunch of 2A teams. It's like, well, they're in a 2-team conference. Like, you got to do what you got to do. They're scheduling teams from Spokane that are 2A schools, which would be the equivalent of 4A teams in Idaho, and they're beating them. And, and they're doing the same with schools from Montana. So, it's not any fault of Bonners Ferry. You're 15 miles south of the Canadian border. I mean, what else are you going to do? So, you're way up. If you draw the hand here, they're up here. So everybody else is in their classification is down here. So, I think they're going to get to state and make some noise. I really do. I look at this team. I like them a whole lot. I think they're complete as far as leadership. You don't get better leaders than what they've got in that lineup and in that locker room, and they've got great coaching. There's top to bottom. That's a really, really tough 3A team that I think a lot of people statewide don't know very much about.
Yeah, they're lurking for sure. Let's do our weekly check-in with Lapway, the Lapway boys.
Oh my gosh. How many triple doubles is that this year for Case? Why not?
I didn't count, but it's got to be
double digits.
You think so? I was gonna say 7 or 8.
I think he's probably got 10.
Jeremiah
he almost had a quad double last night.
Yeah, I mean, it's just insane. He also, Case, why not for Lapway, crossed the 1,500 career point mark for scoring, which is very impressive. He's still only a junior. He's still got a season and a half to go. I don't know what the record is for career points.
Let's see I'll post out the old Google machine and we'll see if we can find an answer very quickly. But yeah, the Idaho high school basketball scoring record. Yeah.
And Idaho doesn't keep track of their records like Montana does. Montana's got all this stuff. They've got an official record book where now the school has to submit the record for it to be considered official. But as far as I know, Idaho doesn't have anything like that. So I think Jared Mercer of Cami.
Mercer, 2,181 points. That's what I came back with.
Yeah, that's the, as far as I can tell, that's the record. And I remember talking about this last year because we were talking about Titus Year out at state, and how close he had gotten, getting over 2,000 points for his career. Could Case, why not hit that 2181? I
think he could. I think he can. With the look at the amount of games and his average of him averaging close to or over 30 a game. And you've got maybe possibly 11 games left this year. I think he could do it. I really do think he could do it probably early on next year.
Because you're looking at, if you take the rest of this year plus a full season of games next year, you're right around 35, 36 games probably. He would have to average 19 points per game, basically 20 points per game to get that.
I think he could do it.
Absolutely. Too.
He's averaging 36 a game right now.
Yeah, I mean, no big deal.
Yawn. And you look at, and that's with him having, you got Terrell Ellenwood Jones in that lineup that scores a lot too. Elias Year's, like, you look at year outs there. Next year without Ellenwood Jones, can he lift more? I think so. Like, 50 isn't out of the question for Case. I think he just plays very unselfishly.
Yeah. That's going to be fun to watch. And meanwhile, Lapwai as a team, Coach Eastman would tell us that it's a team.
We don't care. We're just going to play hard as a team and go win titles. Like, yeah, I know. I know the
right.
answer.
Coach Zach Eastman, coach of Lapwai boys, friend of the program. As a team, Lapwai has now won 52 games in a row. It is the longest active streak in high school hoops, according to Max Preps. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. And they just keep winning. And I just don't see, they're going to hate me for saying this. I'm not going to, you know what? I'm not even going to say it, but it looks
we know. Does it need to be said? Like, we already know. We know.
Yeah, it's going to be impressive to see how far this win total can go. I think it could go a ways. I'll
just say this. It's been incredibly fun to watch. It really has. And when it ends, or if it ends, that's something to be celebrated too in its own right. I think that you get to celebrate both teams in that instance because of what they're able to do. It's gaudy. It's a crazy number in this day and age in high school sports that you can even get that far. But as it continues and rolls along, what else do you want them to do? I mean, they try to schedule 5A teams. Thank you, Post Falls and Lewiston, because you're not getting many more than that. Nobody wants to play them. It's going to hurt your rankings if you play them, per se. So it's like, people, they just need to schedule up. They should opt up to 2A. It doesn't work that way in the state of Idaho. You're just going to elect for the next year going, oh, we're just going to play a 3A schedule this year. It doesn't work that way. So,
right.
Hats off to Coach Eastman's crew. And like I said, it's something to be celebrated day and just one game at a time. It's like notching the belt.
Yep. I did want to give a shout out too, while we're talking small, 1A hoops, Clark Fork looks like they're going to be the team representing District 1 at state. They have now swept the season series with Mullen. They've defeated the Tigers 68-31 and 51-25. They just beat Kootenai last Thursday. They play Kootenai one more time, but man, this is Clark Fork's deal. And with Chase San Roman and Cole San Roman and Ethan Howard, Nathan Shelton, Clark Fork is going to be an interesting team to go compete at that 1A D2 state tournament. I'm excited. We saw it with football, right? The Wampus Cats got to state for the first time in a really long time. And so it's cool. It's going to be cool to see the Wampus Cats at state.
It will be. And I look at the 1A D2 ranks though, and there's another team that's in North Idaho right now that is on an absolute tear, and they play tonight if the power is on at ICCU Arena. In Kendrick, they will take on Potlatch tonight inside the arena. Should be a fun event if they are able to play that and get the power back on. I don't know, the University of Idaho, if it's just you got to contact Avista and pay the bill or something like that to make sure that game takes place. We could put a GoFundMe together or something. I don't know. But no, I'm sure that it was an event with the infrastructure or something like that. But I look at Kendrick. I like Kendrick a lot. I like them a whole lot as far as how they play. And I said that in football. I sound like a broken record. Jagger Hewitt is a very, very good football player. He's might be better on the basketball floor. And that's saying something because he's a great football player. But what he was able to command on the basketball floor with those guys around him too, they need to command the attention. Like that is a dangerous, dangerous team as they get better as the years gone on.
Yeah, Kenrick, it looks good. We talk about the White Pine so much. I wanted to give Clark Fork a little love as well.
Yeah. No, and
Yes, but yes. So Kendrick fans, it's not like I'm like, oh yeah, no, Kendrick, whatever. We talk about you guys a lot.
Clark Fork's coming for you. No,
you're right. Well, I mean, they could be. I don't know, but
make it happen. Let's make a game happen. I'm just kidding.
Let's do it. I mean, Kendrick's got a date to fill after Sitka, Alaska couldn't come down and play them. So
play a neutral site game, have it at NIC, make it happen.
Yeah, well, speaking of NIC, that's where all of this District 1 tournament action is going to be at, once again, is at North Idaho College. The 1A D1 District 1, 1A D2 District 1 is all going to be at NIC, which is a great venue for those.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah.
Yep. Speaking of venues, ICCU Arena, as we talked about, University of Idaho campus, Potlatch Kenrick going to play there tonight as we're recording this on Wednesday, the 25th. Last night, Troy was supposed to play there against Logos and couldn't. Power outage is what I saw. So that's kind of why we were joking about that. And so those teams will have to reschedule that. But Troy is another team that you've been very high on this year as they're continuing to lurk in the White Pine League also. So keep it up, Troy Trojans. Okay. One last result I wanted to touch on from last night, and then we can get into your North Idaho 9 and get out of here. Last night, the Timberlake girls played Sandpoint, and Timberlake, Coach Matt Miller knows what he's got. And so they played Coeur d'Alene a couple weeks ago.
Took him to the wire. Yeah.
Yes. And it was a very close game. Last night, they beat Sandpoint in overtime, 57-48, but how they got to overtime was impressive. They were down 8 with 1:08 remaining, Ryan.
Yeah.
And
they poured it in with time, waning moments of the game. Impressive showing. Like that's an exciting game to watch as a fan anyways, but being a player in those games has got to be just insanity too. You're like, you might be thinking like, no way, hit a couple big shots, and you're like, all right, I guess we're in this. Like, let's see if we can keep it going.
Yes. So Sierra Sumas hits a 3-pointer, brings him to within 5. Then Jenna Chase gets fouled. She makes 2 free throws to bring them to within 3. And then Malia Miller underneath with 22 seconds to go makes the layup and the foul, makes the free throw to tie the game at 45 all to go to overtime. And then in OT, I mean, they outscore Sandpoint 12-3 in overtime. I think Sandpoint was probably a little shell-shocked. And so good win for Timberlake. Man, there's a lot of teams from the north that I think are going to turn heads at state when we get to state. Sandpoint did this a couple years ago. They got on a run at the 4A girls tournament, and everyone kind of wasn't expecting that. The one thing is that a lot of these teams from the north are probably going to be lower seeded because of the max preps rankings. But
which is unfortunate. I mean, I look at like Sandpoint, they're not going to probably get the greatest seed if they are able to win the IEL. And I don't want to prognosticate and say that like that's a for sure thing to happen because Lakeland's going to have to try to say something about that, and so is Moscow. But yeah, any one of those teams that gets there, I don't know if they're going to, even though Sandpoint's been in the rankings for the latter part of this season coming down the stretch, those rankings don't necessarily reflect what's going to happen in the computers with max preps. So, they could end up being like a 5 seed playing a pretty tough, or a 6 or even a 7 seed playing a really tough game. And, but you got to beat obviously the good teams eventually at some point in the tournament. So why not face them early? Look at Centennial last year on the boys' side, taking out Lake City in the first game. So, I think it's going to be interesting. And the scheduling doesn't do any favors for the northern teams, but certainly you have to just do what you can with what you've been given. So,
yep, for sure.
Timberlake took care of business last night. Hats off to the Lady Tigers. That's a big win.
Yeah, huge win for Timberlake. And for a girls' state, I anticipate being the most wide open.
Absolutely.
Anybody get hot and win that. Okay.
Well, 5A, I think 4A and 5A are going to be super competitive. I look at both those.
And for different reasons. 5A because there's a lot of proven commodities.
Star power in that. Yeah, there's a lot of star power in that tournament.
Right? Boise, Timberline, Coeur d'Alene, Lake City, Post Falls, whoever gets there.
Thunder Ridge. I mean, you can throw. Yeah, it's going to be wide open. So 5A is going to be really close competitive tournament because there's a lot of known commodities that are good. 4A is going to be wide open for the opposite reason because there are a lot of unknowns. Shelley has been the kind of the wire to wire consensus number 1 team this year, and this is kind of new for them. They're kind of new at this. Mountain Home, Blackfoot, teams that we are not used to seeing in this power position. Blackfoot has kind of been there the last couple of years, but I don't know, a lot of unknowns in 4A, which could make it fun. So 4A could be a fun tournament. And in 1A D1, I think is going to be a good tournament too. Outside of Lapway, I think the periphery around Lapway is going to be exciting to watch, and then it's going to be like who's playing the Wildcats. But that's just my prognostication. I don't necessarily think the championship game will be close. I think the rest of the tournament is going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
But that's just me looking at it as an objective viewer from the outside, but yeah, we got to give our love to the Lady Wildcats too. So are we ready for the North Idaho 9 yet?
Yes. I was going to say, somebody who did the 1A D1 tournaments last year, boys and girls, there was like one compelling game across the entire, slate. So
Yeah.
I've been there and done that. I know. Okay. Let's go with since we were talking girls hoops, let's go with your North Idaho 9 girls, the top 9 teams in Idaho, regardless of classification.
So number 1, we got Coeur d'Alene. That Viking team, they're legit. And I look at like Tegan Colvin is, in my mind, probably the marquee player on that team. That's really taken over down the stretch. Madison Mitchell, like I said, is that she's got potential for a 25-point night any given night. We obviously know about Madison Simmons, but that lineup is just so tough, and even their bench is good. I mean, they get a lot of contribution off the bench too, like Kelsey Carroll, some of the other players as well. So that Viking team is legit. We saw what they did to Post Falls and just manhandled them on Friday night. We had that game. Lake City 2, I'm looking forward to that rematch between those teams. I believe they play each other this week, so should be an exciting game in that one for Coeur d'Alene and Lake City, number 2 for that game to take place. Lapway at 3, so I'm going to take some grief from Post Falls fans, but Lady Wildcats move up a spot to 3. Post Falls drops a spot to 4. We got to see if they can respond. They've gotten punched in the mouth pretty hard by both Lake City and Coeur d'Alene. See if the return trips can make things interesting, and district tournament time coming around. They've got to show that they're worthy of that top 5 ranking that they had earlier on in the year. 5, we got a tie. Sandpoint and Timberlake. You split the season series. You're having seasons like you did, or you are. You're going to share the 5 spot. So I couldn't separate them two necessarily. 7, I've got Kendrick. That Tigers team's playing really good still down the stretch. Prairie at 8, and then Deary and Cami still tied at 9. So I'm not going to remove either one of those teams. That's my top 9 asterisk 10 for North Idaho.
Right, 9 plus 1. You got the DH in there. Okay,
that's right.
Let's talk about your North Idaho 9 on the boys' side. Not much change, but a couple of things.
Yeah, so top 9, we got Lake City 1, Lapway 2, no surprise there. Coeur d'Alene, Lewiston 3-4, no movement. Bonners Ferry at 5, they beat some good teams along the way. 6, we got Kendrick, Lakeside goes down to 7. Kellogg at 8, and Cami at 9. That's no slight. I mean, Kellogg obviously taking a loss to Bonners Ferry, but I think that schedule is just so darn tough. Strength of schedule wise, I still have them in my top 9. I'm not going to boot them out for a tough loss to a really good Bonners Ferry team. And Lakeside obviously playing a tough game against Bonners Ferry and getting another loss. That's just solidifying. I'm telling you right now, like state tournament, watch out for the Knights. If I'm anybody in that tournament, I do not want to play that team at all. And I don't think they're going to be the team that knocks off Lapway necessarily, but I think that they're the team of anybody in there that's going to make things the most interesting against the Wildcats.
That's going to be big if, but we'll see, I think.
We had that game earlier in the year without Vander Brown, and it was a 3-possession game.
Yeah, that's true.
Until the last 2 minutes.
That's true. All right, I'll give you that.
That was without Vander Brown, like the majority of that game. So yeah, I'm still not. I'm not selling Lakeside. I'm telling you right now. Like I have them as my penciled in 1 and 2 if they're able to go to state and get in and get a seed opposite the Wildcats. I have them over Cami. They got better guard play than Cami, and I'll say that right now. So Cami fans, don't at me.
Let me real quick, just a quick exercise, and then we'll get out of here, I promise. But I think this will be interesting for the fans. What would it look like if the Max Preps rankings, the current rankings were used right now? What would the 1A D1 tournament look like? Lapway would be your 1 seed. Lighthouse Christian would be the 2. Grace would be the 3. Valley would be 4. Cami would be 5. Lakeside would be 6. Victory Charter would be 7, and Liberty Charter would be 8. So the 2 Boise schools would be dead last. So they'd be on opposite sides.
It would be on opposite sides. It would happen.
You would have a first round matchup of Lakeside and Grace, and that would be
That's an awesome game. Are you kidding me?
That would be very interesting.
Come on. That tournament that'd be a fantastic tournament right now. Like,
yeah,
make it happen.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on that as the season goes along with Lakeside because of their lower amount of games, a little lower in the rankings. Okay. We'll leave.
Yeah, they got some games coming up too that are going to be winnable. So yeah,
we'll see. It's fun to talk about this stuff. I feel like
it is. Put on our tinfoil hats or our like little green like accounting visors.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Well, again, district tournament play starting up on the girls' side. We'll have the brackets for you on our website, IdahoSports.com. Just check back for that. And thanks for tuning in, everybody, to the North Idaho Prepcast. For Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Baney, and we'll see you next time on IdahoSports.com.